What's up guys, Asian here again with another build video, and today we're going to be going over the Magicka Sorcerer. So the Magicka Sorcerer has kind of gone through its ups and downs like most builds have throughout the course of ESO's history, from the high at Homestead all the way down to kind of the lows somewhere around Horns of the Reach, and then picking right back up again in Wrathstone. There have been quite a few changes to how Sorcs work, particularly with their pets. So right now, in order to pull the best DPS on a Magicka Sorcerer, you will have to use a pet. Now, in the past, pets have kind of had this sort of negative stigma in trials, but due to a couple of changes that they've made with how pets kind of interact with trial mechanics, pet builds are very, very viable now, and you don't really need to worry about having pets ruin any sort of mechanics now in the game. Along with that, they've also buffed pets a little bit here, so they inherit more of your stats this way. So now Pet Sorcs now are actually a very, very powerful class here, probably one of the best Magicka ranged options in the game right now. So, like the rest of our build videos, we're going over skills, gear, attributes, everything you need to know to basically recreate this build for yourself. I will be going over a couple of the different gear substitutions that you might want to make if you don't have access to certain set pieces and things like that. From there, we will talk about the rotation, kind of what you kind of want to look for in a rotation. There has been a few changes just because of the way that the changes that were made to class abilities in Elsweyr. So this is not going to be exactly a carbon copy of our Magsorc build from last patch in Wrathstone, but it is going to be pretty similar overall. And then we'll do a raid dummy parse on the new 21 million raid dummy, so you guys can get a point of comparison to other Magicka DPS. So the raid dummy does allow us to kind of give a better comparison across different classes, just because it allows us to use basically the same amount of buffs and debuffs across all of our parses. So basically it kind of standardizes and normalizes all of our parses, the exception being Magicka Necromancers. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started here first with our gear. So again, this is just one potential gear combination you might want to consider picking up. I will be going over a couple of different sets that you might want to pick up if you don't have access or you can't get these sets here. So for Monster Helm set, we're going to go with Zaan. So while Magsorc can play at range, being within melee range will allow you to use Zaan, which is probably the strongest Monster Helm set in the game right now. You do get this from Scalecaller Peak, so you do need to have access to the Dragon Bones DLC in order to grab this set. Now, if you cannot play at melee range, if you got to be further away than those at 8-meter radius, you do have several options when it comes to additional Monster Helm sets. So going over them really quick here. So the first one is going to be Grothar. So this is what you're going to use in place of Zaan if you can be within melee range, but you don't have Zaan, or you can't access it because you don't have access to any sort of DLCs. Grothar is a base game set from Vaults of Madness, and it's basically sort of a weaker version of Zaan. So the one piece only adds max Magicka, which is a little bit weaker than adding Spell Crit. And the two piece deals a little bit less damage in terms of single target damage, but it is an AoE, so it is an 8-meter AoE radius, so it is actually quite nice for trash pulls too. So I would probably recommend picking up Grothar anyways, just so you have it there for trash pulls. The next set here is going to be Ilambris. Ilambris has a very good synergy with Magicka Sorcerers because Magicka Sorcs, you do have a very reliable source of shock damage. And if you use a shock damage enchant on the back bar instead of a weapon damage enchant, you have an additional source of shock damage that way. So the Matriarch is also shock damage, so you have a very nice mix of both flame and shock damage coming from Magicka Sorcerer, allowing you to use Ilambris pretty decently. So this is another base game set from Crypt of Hearts 1. Again, the one piece, very similar to Grothar, is just max Magicka, not quite as strong as the Spell Crit from Zaan. And the two piece basically is a proc set, so it basically deals damage whenever you deal flame or shock damage. You have a chance to deal additional damage that way. Now, the flame and the shock components are separate, so just because you proc the flame damage, you can also have a chance to proc the shock damage. Now, the weakness of Ilambris is the very small radius. It basically is a 4-meter radius, so if the boss happens to move out of that proc, then you basically wasted that damage, you wasted that proc. So that's something you want to keep in mind. Ilambris might not be very good for more ranged fights, so or I should say more mobile fights, where the boss might be moving around a lot. You might also want to pick up Slimecraw. So Slimecraw is a base game set from Wayrest Sewers. Because Minor Berserk is not necessarily going to be very consistent in certain trials and certain group dungeons, you might want to pick up Slimecraw. That way you can continue to get Minor Berserk. You don't have to rely on your healer for that buff. Minor Berserk is a very powerful buff in the game, so if you're able to give yourself Minor Berserk 100% of the time, then it's pretty much this two-piece is going to outmatch any of the other Maelstrom sets that you can possibly consider running. So Slimecraw is definitely a set you want to have on hand in those situations where you can't depend on your healer for that Minor Berserk buff. And finally, we do have Falcon Scoria. This is another base game set from City of Ash 2. It's a pretty difficult set to get. The one piece adds max health, which doesn't really help out your DPS too much. It does help out your survivability, but Pet Sorks, you don't really need to worry about that too much because you do get some additional health from your Sork passes while you have the pet out. And the proc itself is not actually all that strong. Now, it is pretty consistent because the proc conditions is just damage over time effects, so pretty much most of your abilities. However, the proc itself doesn't do quite as much damage compared to something like Ilambris, Grothar, or Zaan. The upside of using Scoria is that because it deals all of its damage in one hit, it is better for mobile fights compared to Ilambris. Now, one final thing that you might want to consider doing is you might want to consider running two different Maelstrom sets that have one-piece crit. So, for example, here, look at Iceheart. So Iceheart comes from Direfrost Keep. The one piece adds additional spell crit. You can pair one piece Iceheart with one piece Slimecraw, which also provides spell crit on the one piece. That gives you basically two additional spell crit armor bonuses, which actually ends up being, typically speaking, a little bit stronger than a lot of Maelstrom sets, full Maelstrom sets when you have to play at range. So that's something you also want to consider picking up. Just basically something like Slimecraw and Iceheart, or Slimecraw and Zaan, or Zaan and Iceheart. Basically any sort of Maelstrom sets that'll give you some additional spell crit on the one piece there. Moving on to our actual sets here. So the first set is going to be False God's Devotion. This is the perfected version here. This comes from Sunspire. The non-perfect version comes from normal Sunspire. The perfected version comes from veteran Sunspire. So you don't need to do any of the hard modes to get the perfect version. This can do just normal vet, and you can get the perfected version of False Gods. So False God is pretty nice. It's basically the Magicka version of VO. You get Spell Crit, Minor Slayer, Spell Crit, and the 5-piece gives you spell damage, next Magicka, and reduces the cost of your Magicka abilities by 8% if you have the perfected version. The imperfect version does not have that additional max Magicka bonus there. So False God, very, very nice. Magicka Sorcerers, typically speaking, have one of the worst sustains out of all the Magicka DPS classes in the game right now. Matched probably only by Mag Decays and Magicka Templars. So having the additional cost reduction is actually quite nice, and compared to Siroria, it's going to be a little bit weaker when you can get all those stacks of Siroria, but if you can't get those stacks of Siroria because False Gods, that 5-piece has 2 armor bonuses instead of just the 1, it basically gives it a little bit of additional strength here, making it actually very nice on a Magicka Sorcerer. So on more mobile fights, I highly recommend running Perfected False Gods Devotion if you have it. The non-perfect version is still pretty nice. You do lose out on that max Magicka, so it's not quite as strong as some other sets that we're going to go over in a little bit, but it is still pretty nice to have if you can't get your perfected version from veteran Sunspire. For our front bar set, we're running Mother's Sorrow. Mother's Sorrow is a base game set from Deshawn, so it's a light armor set. You can farm it, you can buy it off guild traders. There is a unique Infused Lightning Staff as a quest reward that you can use if you're waiting to get your Inferno Staff for the front bar set. This basically just adds a bunch of spell crit. Because the Shadow Mundus was buffed, it is quite a powerful Mundus Stone, and to combine the additional crit damage from the Shadow Mundus, we want to increase our spell crit. So running Mother Sorrow is a very nice bonus here. Now, even though it is a flat static bonus on the 5-piece, because it is crit and not something like spell damage, we can run this on the front bar without losing too much DPS, mainly because you're going to be on your front bar very often, even as a Magicka Sorcerer when you're doing a lot of bar swapping. Then for our weapons, we have double Inferno staves as always. We have Precise on the front bar with a flame damage enchant, and Infused on the back bar with a weapon damage enchant. If you want, you can replace this weapon damage enchant with a shock damage enchant for a little bit more single target DPS, or if you want a little bit more sustain, you can also swap this out for an Absorb Magicka enchant here. Now, some other sets that you're going to want to consider picking up here. So we're going to go through them in alphabetical order, so just please bear with me while I'm trying to find all of these sets. Starting off first with the dungeon sets, there are a few dungeon sets that you can pick up and potentially use on a Magicka Sorc. First one I want to talk about is going to be Nexus Touch. This just basically adds spell damage to your shock damage abilities, which is a fair amount of your Magicka Sorc abilities, particularly if you're using a heavy attack Sorc, but for this particular build, Nexus Touch is not very strong. We're not going to be using it at all because a majority of our damage is not going to be shock damage, so Nexus Touch actually isn't going to be very useful for us. I'm bringing this up now just to kind of preempt those questions about Nexus Touch. Very good for a heavy attack Sorc build, not so great for a light attack pet build. From there, we also have Burning Spellweave. So Burning Spellweave was once one of the strongest sets in the game, but it has since been nerfed, and with the introduction of a couple of new sets, it's no longer quite as strong as it used to be, but it's still a really potent set to hold on to. This comes from City of Ash, so it's a base game set. You will have to farm it. And because it is a proc chance, basically whenever you deal damage, you have a chance to proc that additional spell damage. You can put this on the front bar. You don't have to necessarily worry about whether it's a body set or a front bar set here. And that is pretty much it. Scathing Mage has a couple of niche uses for trash pulls, but you're not really going to be wearing this too much for single target pure raw DPS, and the other sets just aren't really all that powerful. So the one dominant set you're going to want to try to get is going to be Burning Spellweave, and if you want to do a heavy attack Sorc, Nexus Touch is a pretty decent alternative to get here. Moving on here to Overland Sets, there are a couple of Overland Sets that might be useful for you. We already talked about Mother Sorrow. That's going to be an Overland set, but there is another Overland set, Necropotence, very nice for pet Sorcs. When you have a pet active, your max magic is increased by 30 to 150. It comes from Rivenspire, so it's a base game set. Pretty strong, just basically gives you a ton of max magicka, and it really helps boost your overall DPS. Pets obviously scale just only from max magicka, so this is pretty much a very nice boost to your Matriarch, and if you're deciding to run the familiar as well, it's going to boost their DPS compared to using something like Julianos, which doesn't boost the DPS at all. So Necropotence is a very nice set to run on a pet Sorc. You will have to wear this on the body. You can't have this on the front bar because when you swap to your back bar, you will end up losing that max magicka. And then the kind of what I like to call the budget version of Necropotence is Crafty Elfique. So this is very similar to Necropotence, it just adds pure max magicka. The 5-piece adds less max magicka though at 2560, but it doesn't have that sort of condition that you need to have a pet active. Now as a Sorc, you have a pet active, you're running a pet Sorc, but if for whatever reason you decide to run a non-pet Sorc, Crafty Elfique is another potential option here. It's going to be a little bit weaker compared to some other sets like Julianos, which is a pretty nice crafted set, very easy to obtain. It's just that Crafty Elfique just pales in comparison to Necropotence in terms of raw stats, so if you have to choose between the two of them, go with Necropotence and not Crafty Elfique. And that is pretty much it. There are maybe one or two light trial sets you're going to want to have on hand. Obviously, Mantle of Siroria. This comes from Cloud Rest. Very strong set here. Not going to be quite as useful for mobile fights, but even in mobile fights, if you have the perfected version, if you're able to maintain on average 5 to 6 stacks, it still ends up being a very strong set. So definitely something you want to pick up. But for more mobile fights, you might want to pick something else up, like, for example, False God's Devotion. The other set that you might want to consider picking up, and this is going to depend on each specific sort of group, your trials group, it's going to be Infallible Mage. So on a heavy attack Sorc, this is actually not a terrible set to pick up. The problem is this set is better suited on a healer rather than a DPS, because the other DPS sets that we've already mentioned are going to be a little bit stronger. So something you want to have on hand just in case, let's say your raid lead wants you to run Infallible Mage, so that way that clears up a spot for the healers to run something like Mending or Taurugs, but for pure raw, just sort of min-maxing your overall DPS, Infallible Mage is not really going to make it onto your tool set, just because the 5-piece is not particularly strong, and again, Mana Vulnerability is typically applied by healers running this set, or by healers running the shock glyphs, so you don't really need Infallible Mage if you don't need to run it. So something you want to have on hand, but don't anticipate running it very often, if at all. So that's pretty much it for all the sets. I also did want to talk about Julianos a little bit here, so a very classic set here. Let me pick it up here. It's a 5-piece set, Law of Juliana, 6 trait set, I should say, from Hrothgar, so you can craft it yourself, you can buy it off guild traders, you can get something to craft it for you. Just a very classic standard set to run. Just spell crit, max magicka, spell crit, spell damage. Very, very solid set. Another one is going to be, where is it? Mechanical Acuity. This is another 6 trait set from Clockwork City, so again, very similar to Julianos. You can craft it yourself, you have access to DLC, you can ask them to craft it for you. This is a very, very nice set. Typically speaking, it'll be worn on a front bar set because it is a proc set, but you can wear this on the body as well. Just a really nice set, especially when you pair that with the Shadow Mundus and the fact that Sorks, typically speaking, have a little bit lower crit compared to something like a Nightblade. So definitely a nice set to hold on to. You can use this in place of something like Mother's Sorrow. It's going to be a little bit better than Mother's Sorrow in terms of raw burst DPS, but when it comes to longer fights, the DPS from Mechanical Acuity and Mother's Sorrow, typically speaking, will end up evening out a little bit, mainly because Mechanical Acuity does have a few armor bonuses that are not going to be beneficial for your DPS. For example, that 2-piece is weapon damage, which, as we know, as a Magicka DPS, we don't really need too much because the only physical damage we're going to be doing is going to be from Rearming Trap. Alright, so moving on over to our character sheet. I am a Dark Elf. Dark Elves are going to be one of the best races for Magicka DPS in general. They get 1875 max Magicka and 258 spell damage. They also get 1875 stamina and 258 weapon damage, so if you do want to play a Stamswork on the side, or if you want to be able to swap between the two, Dark Elves are a very nice hybrid DPS race. To really min-max though, you will want to be a high elf. The Altmer get 2000 max Magicka and 258 spell damage, so just a little bit more than Dark Elves, but not by all too much. Other races you can consider are going to be the Bretons. The Bretons get 2000 max Magicka, a 100 Magicka regen, and they get 7% cost reduction on all Magicka abilities. So in terms of raw sustain, nothing beats the Bretons. If you're running the Breton, you might not even need to run False Gods of Devotion, because your Breton passives actually give you more sustain than False Gods of Devotion does. And finally, if you do want to kind of take a one-size-fits-most approach, a sort of master, jack of all trades, master of none race, then Khajiits are going to be your best bet. They get 825 Magicka health and stamina, 85 Magicka regen, stamina regen, and 100 health regen, plus they get 10% additional critical healing done and critical damage done. So in terms of just raw balance stats, nothing can beat the Khajiits. So if you kind of want to have a character that can do it all, healing, tanking, DPSing, Khajiits are a nice option for you. For attributes, we have all points into Magicka. Don't need to worry too much about health because we do get some additional health from our Sork passives. That gives us additional health while we have our pet out. Now, if you're running a non-pet Sork on the other hand, you might want to consider running a few points into health or running a health enchant on your armor pieces. That way you can make up for that lost health. Mundus, we're going to use the Shadow. Still the strongest Mundus in the game. Critical damage is a huge bonus here. We are a Vampire for the additional 10% Magicka regen. You also get some additional damage mitigation when you hit stage 3 and you get the Undeath passive. And for food, we are running Clockwork Citrus Fillet here. Moving on to our skills. For our front bar, we have Crystal Frags, Elemental Weapon, Twilight Matriarch. You can use the other morph if you prefer, which is the Twilight Tormentor, but a lot of people prefer the Twilight Matriarch for the heal because the Tormentor you do eat into your sustain a little bit, plus it has this weird reverse execute where it only deals additional damage while enemies are above 50% health. So a little bit weird. Most people prefer the Matriarch for the additional burst heal, which is going to, usually speaking, come more in handy a little bit more. Then we have Endless Fury, Bound Aegis, and Shooting Star. On our back bar, we have Daedric Prey, Lightning Flood. You can go Lightning Flood or Liquid Lightning, whichever one you prefer. If you're able to basically cast Lightning Flood on cooldown, then it's going to be the stronger option here. But if you can't cast this on cooldown, then Liquid Lightning will give you a little bit more sustain and a little bit more damage. Then we have Blockade of Fire, Twilight Matriarch again, Rearming Trap, or Channel Acceleration, depending on whether you can be within melee range or not. And then we have the Greater Storm Atronach. Going over our champion points, CP cap has not changed, it's still 810, gives us 270 points across each of our different constellations. So starting with the green CPs, 100 Arcanist, 75 Tenacity, that gives 95 points. 31 Shadow Ward, 31 Tumbling, and 33 Warlord, that gives us all 270. Now you can play around a little bit with your green CPs, so for example, you can put Arcanist down to 75 if you'd like. You can bring Tenacity up to 100 if you're heavy attacking very often to get more resources back. It's kind of up to you how you want to play around with that. For our blue CPs, so this particular setup assumes that you have pretty much all of the debuffs in the game. So you have Torg's Infused Crusher, you have Alkash, you have Major and Minor Breach. If you're missing any of these debuffs, then you will need to shift a few points around into Spell Erosion in order to make up for that loss of penetration. So if you do need to move some points into Spell Erosion, feel free to do so to make up for that loss in penetration, loss in debuff, uptimes, things like that. 66 Elfborn, 64 Elemental Expert, 11 Spell Erosion, 23 Staff Expert, 66 Master at Arms, and 40 into Thaumaturge. Now, you might want to drop a few points from Staff Expert depending on your specific trial. If you're in a more mobile fight, you might want to drop a few points out of Staff Expert, put them into Master at Arms, pump it up to 72, and you can pump Elfborn up to 72 as well. Now, if you do need to put some points in the Spell Erosion, you can drop Elfborn down to 61, you can drop Elite Expert down to 56 or 49, drop Staff Expert down to 9, Master at Arms, try to keep at 66, Staff Expert at 9 just so you get the Butcher passive. You can drop Thaumaturge down to maybe 37 or 34. That'll give you a few more points to put in a Spell Erosion, but ideally you're able to get those debuffs you need in order to get only 11 Spell Erosion. Finally, our red CPs. This is kind of a one-size-fits-most approach, a general approach you can say. This will basically give you very good mitigation across all pieces of content, but it's not going to maximize your mitigation for any single trial or anything like that. We have 81 Ironclad, 61 Thick-Skinned, and 64 on both Hardy and Elemental Defender. Now, real quick before we go into our rotation, talk a little bit about traits and enchants here with our gear. So I have all the vines here with all max Magicka enchant. This is on a pet Sorc, so remember we do have the additional health, so we don't need to run any sort of health enchants here. You can go Infused on your large pieces if you so desire. The DPS difference is in favor of Infused, but by less than half a percentage point in terms of raw DPS. So not really worth it. If you happen to get Infused large pieces, then by all means you can use them. It's not any sort of big DPS difference between Infused and Divines. For our jewelry traits, we have all spell damage enchants and all bloodthirsty. You can also go with arcane or infused. Arcane's going to be a little bit better on mag Sorcs, especially pet Sorcs, because again, pets do not scale off of spell damage, so infused is going to be a little bit of waste there. So you can go bloodthirsty or arcane. And we've already talked about our weapon traits here. So going over our rotation. So the rotation itself is going to be static. So if you're running Lightning Flood, I should say, it's going to be static. If you're running Liquid Lightning, it's going to be more dynamic because Liquid Lightning has a 12-second duration. But with Lightning Flood, we have 8 seconds on Lightning Flood, 8 seconds on Blockade, 6 seconds on Daedric Prey, and then we have 14 seconds, roughly 15 actually, on Rearming Trap here. So it ends up being a pretty static rotation overall. Now the one thing I want to keep in mind, you should keep in mind, is that Crystal Frags proc. So the way Crystal Frags works is whenever you cast an ability that uses up Magicka, so Elemental Weapon, Endless Fury, if you decide to use the Matriarch heal, all three of those will have a chance to proc a Crystal Frags proc. Once you get the proc, you're going to want to use it right away. The reason for that is you don't want to sit on the proc, because if you happen to continue to use Elemental Weapon or Endless Fury or whatever, and you get a second proc but you haven't used up the first proc, that first proc is going to be wasted. You can't basically save up your proc. So as soon as you get a proc, you're going to want to get it off basically as quickly as you can. Now the only time you won't do this is if you need to re-up your back bar dots. So if you do need to re-up your back bar dots, just re-up your back bar. Again, it's a static rotation. You're basically going to do back bar, front bar, back bar, front bar. So just finish up your back bar rotation, and then as soon as you get back to your front bar, use that Crystal Frags right away. So basically what the rotation is going to look like is like this. So again, static rotation, back bar, front bar, back bar, front bar. It's nothing too complicated. Again, this is with Lightning Flood. If you have Liquid Lightning, then it's going to be a little bit more dynamic because your dot durations are going to be off a little bit. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to start with Lightning Flood, Blockade, Pray, then put down your trap. Flood, Blockade, Pray, Trap. You can basically do Trap every other time you're on your back bar. So we go into our back bar once. And our back bar a second time. And then we just cast Rearming Trap. And that's basically the entire rotation there. So again, pretty simple, pretty basic. It just goes back bar, front bar, back bar, front bar. You can think of it basically as 4 different blocks. The only sort of dynamic part of this is going to be basically their crystal frags. It's going to be a little bit of RNG based as to when you can get crystal frags. And remember, we just want to make sure to use it right away. Now when you get to execute, which for mag sorcs is 20% or lower, instead of running elemental weapon, you'll be running Endless Fury instead. You still want to get those crystal frag procs off because they still do quite a bit of damage there, but instead of elemental weapon, you're just using Endless Fury instead. And then in terms of ultimate, you'll be using your Atronach ultimate. So I like to basically swap to it and use it as soon as I get it up. It's up to you if you kind of want to wait until you're re-upping your back bar dots and then put it down. It's kind of up to you. I just like to use it as soon as I get it. So with all that said and done, let's go ahead and do a raid dummy parse so you guys can get an idea of the amount of DPS that we're able to pull and give you guys a point of comparison to the other Magicka DPS classes that I have out. Now, the only class you will not be able to make direct comparison to is going to be the Magicka Necromancers, because the Magicka Necromancers do get major vulnerability. No other class has that, so if you do want to compare to the Magicka Necromancer, you can either adjust the Magicka Necromancer parse down, or you can adjust your Magicka Sorcerer parse up with identical major vulnerability uptime to a Magicka Necro parse, which is typically speaking on a raid dummy going to be around 8 to 9% or so. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started, and I will try to narrate a little bit here, but again, this is a static rotation, so not too much to discuss here. We are using spell power potions as well as we would be in an actual raid. So again, static rotation, we're going to be using trap when we're on our back bar for the second time here. And I do want everyone to kind of keep a close eye on our Magicka levels. Remember that this is without an absorbed Magicka back bar, so we're not getting any sort of additional sustain from an absorbed Magicka glyph. The only sustain that we're getting is from arguably the crystal frag procs, which cost a little bit less, our potions, those shards from the raid dummy, and False God's Devotion. Since we got our Atronach, I'm just going to use it here. Now, if you were using Liquid Lightning instead of Lightning Flood, Liquid Lightning has now a 12-second duration in Elsweyr, so your dots are going to be quite staggered, so it's going to be a little bit more dynamic if you're running Liquid Lightning. So if you're running Liquid Lightning, you're basically going to need to use something like Action Duration Reminder or Srendar to keep a track of your dots and basically re-up your back bar dots whenever they go down. It's not going to be static because it's going to be off by quite a bit. It's a 4-second offset between Liquid Lightning and Blockade. So it's going to be a little bit different here. So I do recommend, instead of running Liquid Lightning, to run Lightning Flood, just to simplify your rotation a little bit. Lightning Flood also does do more damage if you're able to cast it on cooldown. So basically if there's no downtime on Lightning Flood, so it will deal more damage than Liquid Lightning that way. That being said, though, there is an argument to be made for Liquid Lightning because you do get some additional sustain out of it because you're not casting it quite as often. Again, I like to use my Atronach pretty much as soon as I get it, but you don't have to do that. So you can see here that sometimes you're going to go quite a bit before you can get a crystal frag proc. It's a little bit of RNG based here. And part of Sorc sustain is going to be a little bit dependent on a frag proc, so sometimes you're going to have really great sustain because you have great frag RNG, sometimes you'll have really bad sustain because you have bad frag RNG. Alright, so we're in execute now, so instead of elemental weapon, we're going to be using Fury instead, and we're still going to be using our frag procs because our frag proc is still quite strong, doing as much damage as our Fury. So there we go, that is our Magicka Sorc parse here. So we managed to pull 79.5k DPS. I have pulled 80k before using this build. There's a little bit of RNG involved in Mag Sorc parses because of that crystal frag proc. Let me see if I still have the 80k parse actually. You can see here a little bit of RNG, so I had one with 79.6, one with 79.8, one with 80k, this latest one which was 79.5. If we take a look at our 80k parse, we had 29 frag procs versus our most recent one, which we had 27. So not that big of a difference. If we take a look at the other parses here, this one we had 31 frag procs. This one we had 30 frag procs. So a little bit of RNG here and there. So this is definitely the lower frag procs here. But we had 85% of them crit compared to on the 80k parse where we only had 62% crit. So there's a little bit of crit RNG, a little bit of frag RNG as well. You can see here, Lightning Flood, very, very strong here. It's top of the line if we don't consider our lead attacks here. And the Matriarch is also quite powerful. Again, they did change them pets so that they do inherit a lot more of our stats now. Pretty much the only thing they don't inherit now from us is going to be spell damage, so they inherit things like Minor Berserk, Major Berserk, so very, very nice buff to their overall DPS. Atronach is a very strong ultimate to use. Not only is it deal good damage, but it also provides one other person with Major Berserk as well, which is a pretty nice support ultimate for a DPS. Not quite as strong as the Necromancer ultimate, but still pretty nice nonetheless. And everything just kind of falls down from there. Rearming Trap actually isn't that bad of a dot, especially on a Dark Elf, because you do get some additional weapon damage and stamina. So you have 1.1, 0.3, and 0.2 combined for about 1.6% of our DPS. So not terrible. Definitely not as strong as it is on a stamina DPS, but it's not something to be ignored either. So that is going to be it for this build video. Hopefully you guys found this informative. If you guys have any questions about the build, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I will be releasing a heavy attack Sorc build and a non-pet Sorc build as well. That'll be after all the other more meta builds have already been released. Again, I hope you guys found this video informative, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.